YouTube, what's going on? It's Juan Gotti here with another Washington Commanders live stream. And in today's live stream, we have a very, very special guest. Jags Fan Cave is coming on here to join the show to preview the matchup this Sunday between the Washington Commanders and the Jacksonville Jaguars. So without further ado, let's get straight into today's live stream. But before we do, make sure go down below. Leave a like on this video, subscribe if you're new, and turn on post notifications so you get notified when I upload content about the NFL, or in this case, our Washington Commanders. And do me a favor and subscribe to Jag Fan Cave for all your Jacksonville Jaguars news. How are you doing tonight, my man?
I'm chilling, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, so I want to first say I apologize, running a little bit behind, but it happens. I had to set up and stuff like that. Was having some trouble with that, but I'm looking forward to this matchup, man. How does it feel to finally have some football, back? It takes a very, very long time to get here, but once it starts, it goes by like this. Before you know it, we're in December. But I want to quickly touch on last night, the Buffalo Bills versus the Los Angeles Rams. What a game. Josh Allen, in my opinion, is the best quarterback in football. Stephon Diggs is one of the best receivers in football. How did you feel about that game? And watching that game, what were some of your takeaways?
Honestly, I hate to come off sounding like the salty ex in the relationship, but every time I get the opportunity to watch Jalen Ramsey look like a bum, a little part of my heart feels warm. The whole faking the back injury to get out of Jacksonville just rubbed me the wrong way. So that bothered me. But at the same time, I don't think anybody expected the Bills to just absolutely lay the beat down on the Rams the way they did. It just seemed like they laid an egg out there. Matthew Stafford was selling so hard. Considering I have him on my fantasy team, I was just cursing at the TV the entire night. Felt like Billy Mays. He was selling so hard out there.
Yeah. I mean, I knew I picked the Bills to win. But no, I definitely didn't expect it to be one of those games. And they did that performance with having 3 turnovers of their own. So just imagine what the final score could have been if they didn't turn over the ball 3 times. I mean, one, for me, honestly, Josh Allen's receivers were selling him. I mean, it hits McKenzie's right in the hands and he drops it. Josh Allen was on one tonight, man. I mean, yesterday night, man. And he's the MVP front runner. They're the Super Bowl favorite. So, and they put it on display as to why. But it's great to have football back. But I want to get a little bit into your backstory. That's what I do with all my guests that come on the show here. How did you become a Jacksonville Jaguars fan, and why the Jaguars?
Well, I'm from Jacksonville, so it's kind of just the hometown team aspect. I didn't go to a ton of games when I was a kid, but whenever I did get to go, it always felt like a special time going. And when I was growing up, it was the Jack Del Rio era, so you guys are well familiar with him.
Yeah.
He was our head coach at the time, David Garrard, Maurice Jones-Drew. They were good at the time of me growing up and as a kid. And so unfortunately, since they hooked on to me as a kid, they drug me through the mud of the Gus Bradley, the Blaine Gabbert, the Blake Bortles, the Gardner Minshew, the Jake Luton, the Mike Glennon. I can keep going. And I feel like a Browns fan running through the list of bad Jaguar starting quarterbacks. And honestly, it latched on. And then right before the 2017 season, I really got committed to them. And then 2017 absolutely sunk their teeth into me. And I have not let go since. So I'm Duval till I die now. I can't let go.
Yeah. And I want to ask the question. I mean, that's how, for me, for the most part, that's how mine's is as far as it being the hometown team and whatnot. I mean, it seems like that's majority of, NFL fans. It's their hometown team, and they just gravitate to what they know and what their family is fans of, and just what's in their area. I could answer this same question, and honestly, for me, it's loyalty and just the love of this team, and I can't see myself rooting for no other team. But how were you able to just stay loyal to a team that's just been so bad for so long? I mean, and gave you that glimmer of hope in 2017, and then you go back to just being in the bottom of the AFC South. And again, I have no room to brag because that's the same situation we're kind of in. 30 plus years, this team hasn't been successful. So, like, how are you able to just stay loyal to the Jacksonville Jaguars?
Well, part of me is it's just like it's not in me to jump that ship. I'm loyal to a fault almost with being a Jaguar fan, because I'll sit there. I was convincing people why Jake Luton led teams, why Mike Glennon led teams had a chance to win in games. And it's honestly part of it's just blind delusion. I convince myself every game they have a shot, but it honestly is probably just blind faith that they're eventually going to get it right, and a blind squirrel is going to find the nut eventually, and it appears that they have.
Okay, so I want to know last year. Take me back to last year, and we hear all the stories and talks about Urban Meyer and the situation that happened with him. What was that like as far as how he treated the players is what we're hearing, and just that whole culture last year? What happened? I mean, like,
Oh,
why?
it was weird too, because obviously, Gainesville is just about an hour and a half away from Jacksonville, so everyone in Jacksonville is very familiar with Urban Meyer. And whenever the hire was announced, it was you were either super against it, saying no, this guy is a terrible person, you don't want what he's going to bring. But there was the side of that I was on that was like, this guy's won national championship, so all about it. And the fan base was kind of going at itself from the beginning, whether you were pro-Urban, against Urban. And then the whole offseason came through and things were really building up momentum. He was doing his whole back to his college days, recruiting essentially a fan base to believe in the 2021 Jaguars. And then very quickly on, we kind of learned this guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. We had a week 1 matchup against the Houston Texans, and he's standing at the podium fielding questions, and he's talking about Joe Mixon. And he's like, oh, yeah, Joe Mixon's going to do this. Joe Mixon's going to do that. And the reporters kind of played it off like, oh, this guy's so good, he's already game planning week 4. No, this guy's just a moron, and he doesn't know who plays for the Houston Texans. And so it slowly kind of just developed. And then once we got to the Cincinnati game and the whole bar incident happened, and then the leaked videos happened, that really is when it just kind of snowballed. And we really started to see what Urban Meyer is, because he sold us on the fact he did a deep dive prior to the regular season, really learned the NFL game before even being hired. And very quickly we learned this guy doesn't know anything. We had, the 1,000-yard rusher James Robinson finished the year with 170 tackles or touches out of the backfield, which is just ludicrous. Any football fan knows you have a 1,000-yard rusher back there, you feed that man, especially when you have the practice squad worthy wide receivers we had out there. Tavon Austin was fielding quality starting reps for the Jaguars last year. And it was just, I could go on and on. I could honestly probably fill your show with bad Urban stories from just the 15 games he was the Jaguars head coach.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, we had to go through a lot of unfortunate quarterbacks. Jay Gruden, and just the
we're familiar with him.
Yeah, and but I don't think it was nothing as bad as Urban Meyer for that 1 year, man. That just speaks volumes as to how terrible it was. I mean, you go back to, you said it, you have James Robinson, who came in the year prior and, lit the league on fire. And you're thinking he's going to come in here the following year and pick up where he left off. And it just wasn't the case. And Urban Meyer just didn't know what he was doing. So that was last year. You go on to this year, and you guys have the number 1 pick for the second consecutive year. You spend the most money, and I want to say, is it league history in free agency?
Yeah, we're flirting with that.
You do that. You bring in Doug Peterson. You bring in a whole new coaching staff as far as the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator. This is their first time, I guess, getting the nod to do that kind of thing. What is the feel around Jacksonville right now? And why, or not why, but how do you personally feel about the Jacksonville Jaguars headed into this season?
I think this team has a lot of characteristics that 2017 team had. And going into the 2017 season, they were 2016, they were abysmal, and it was just, Blake Bortles had 1,000 or almost 5,000 yards passing in garbage time. And, there were some pieces there, Allen Robinson, and then some nice pieces on defense. It was Ramsey's rookie year. But then that 2017 team really, once again, they blew a bunch of money. I want to say blow. They spent the bunch of money on the defensive side like they did in 2022. They brought in a bunch of nice veteran players. And then after that, they took the league by storm. They won the AFC South and rode that momentum all the way to the AFC Championship game. And I think this 2022 team has all of the same characteristics. A real sleeper team. They've won 4 games in 2 years, in the 2 years prior. And now we're looking at this team, obviously Trevor's second year, that second year leap. and just the pieces are coming together. And I think it's a very quiet sleeper team to make the AFC playoffs.
Yeah, I personally feel like the Jacksonville Jaguars are in a solid spot. For me, looking on the outside, um, I think you guys upgraded a lot, especially at the wide receiver position. Now, I personally feel like the Colts may still be like the front runner in the AFC South as of right now. But like, no offense to the AFC South, but that division is just year in and year out just terrible, and it's so boring to watch. I love football, and I'm gonna watch it regardless. But it's so tough to just watch AFC South football. Like I don't even know. Like, do you guys have a genuine rival? Like if it's Texans week, are you jacked? Like if it's Colts week, are you like just that extra hatred? Is it there in the AFC South?
It's there, but not to the same level as it is for like the NFC East or it's like the AFC North. It's not there for them in those same ways. But obviously the Jaguars have a lot of history going back with the Titans, right? Whenever they remade the divisions, the Titans and the Jaguars faced off when the Jaguars had the best record in the league, 14-2. They were steamrolling everybody in that year. And then obviously there's the whole rumor that someone on the Titans staff had the Jaguars playbook. They were spying on Jaguar practices. And then that was the sole reason, because there was one team that beat the Jaguars that year. The Titans beat them 3 times in a row, 2 in the regular season and once in the AFC Championship game. And they beat the brakes off them all 3 games. And so when you talk about an offense like that, it stokes the fire for Jaguar fans that the Titans are just a bunch of no good Mayo-eating cheaters. And then you talk about the Indianapolis Colts. There's a long history with the city of Jacksonville and the Irsay family. Jim Irsay, the Colts owner's father, used Jacksonville to get a better deal from the city of Indianapolis the first time they were there. And so there's a lot of history that goes back. And inside the AFC South, the Jaguars have a lot of hatred going out. But obviously, when you are as bad as the Jaguars have been, those teams don't look at you as a rival because they're like, you can hate us all you want, we're still gonna put 40 on you. And so it's just like it's on the Jaguar side, they have rivals. On the AFC South or the rest of the AFC South, I don't think they look at Jacksonville as much of as a rival.
Okay, that's interesting to watch because I mean, like you said, and even our rival, the Dallas Cowboys, even like that rivalry isn't as juiced and jacked up as it once was. But it was interesting to hear that from a Jaguars fan because on the outside looking in, or I guess really besides like you said, the AFC North, really. I look at other rival divisions and I don't know if teams really get juiced up for their rivals like, the AFC North and NFC. So it's interesting to have that insight. Now let's move on to Sunday's matchup, shall we? Washington Commanders set to host the Jacksonville Jaguars in their inaugural game as the Commanders. Jacksonville traveling to Maryland. I was about to say DC, but it's in Landover, Maryland, so let's just call it Maryland. To face the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, the first matchup that I really want to talk about, not really a matchup, but something that I don't know how it is on the Jaguars front, but something personally that I'm surprised I haven't heard a lot about, and that's how Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson has a history of from together back in Philadelphia. And I don't know if it's the same as Doug Peterson beginning to ask questions about that, but over here, it just maybe I haven't been paying attention, but it just seems like we're not even paying attention to that. Like, how has it been over there?
It's every day he gets asked at least a question about the relationship he left with Carson, and it's kind of getting to the point where he's just kind of making a joke out of it because he's answering the same question almost every day. But it's definitely there. But I don't think Press Taylor and Doug Peterson are too concerned with their history that they have with Carson.
Yeah, I honestly can't say the same. I listened to the press conferences, and I don't think that we've asked about Doug Peterson and whatnot. Now, I think that will be a little bit more of an advantage for you guys because Doug Peterson knows Carson Wentz like the back of his hand. I mean, I guess Carson could say the same thing. He'd be like, "Oh, well, we know this kind of offense," but I think Doug Peterson has the advantage there. But then you go to another matchup. I want to get your answer and let me know what are some of the strengths that you think you guys could take, have and you could take advantage of this Sunday. But more importantly than that, what are some of the weaknesses that you think the Jacksonville Jaguars have heading into this week 1 matchup and something that scares you?
Oh, definitely the interior of our offensive line. Obviously, you're very familiar with Brandon Sheriff. You know, he's our right guard now. You're familiar. I'm familiar with Andrew Norwell. You know, your guys' guard now. But outside of Brandon Sheriff, we have an insane amount of immaturity on that line. You look at the left guard; it's a guy coming out of a D3 school in his third year. Obviously, you know, he showed some nice things playing at right guard last year, but now he converts over to left guard with the addition of Sheriff. So that's interesting to see what he's going to look like over at the left guard spot. And then you look at the center position, and that's a rookie. You know, Luke Fortner is a third round pick out of Kentucky. And what is the interior of the offensive line going to look like? Obviously, there's veterans on both tackle spots, Cam Robinson, Juwan Taylor. But obviously, with Jonathan Allen on the interior, that's a huge red flag for me. The fact that we have so much youth and so much inexperience on the interior, it just seems like a match made in heaven for Jonathan Allen to line up on the left side of that line and just abuse Ben Barch and Luke Fortner and just completely avoid Sheriff. But then for the strength, I'm probably going to go with the front seven of this Jaguars defense. Mm-hmm. You look at what they did in the draft. 3 of their 4 first picks in the draft went to the linebackers. You know, Trayvon Walker, Devin Lloyd, and then Chad Muma, 2 off ball, 1 on the line. And then you also add Arden Key, who had 4 sacks in the preseason. Roy Robertson Harris has looked strong. Foley Fatukasi is one of the best interior defensive lineman, nose tackle kind of hybrid positions in the league. So you look at the amount of depth and the amount of pressure they've been able to generate in the preseason and how little they've had run on them. I think that's absolutely the strength of this Jaguars team now.
Yeah, and I really liked what you guys did as far as addressing the linebacker position. Devin Lloyd and Chad Muma were 2 linebackers that I wanted us to draft because the linebacker position for us as far as depth is a position position that's a little concerning for us, and it's been that way for a while. And again, Devin Lloyd and Chad Muma and Nakobe Dean were some of the guys that I wanted us to go after, but apparently we obviously didn't. And you talk about the weakness of it being the interior offensive line. You talked about Jonathan Allen, but I would be, worried about Deron Payne. We drafted Fedarian Mathis from Alabama, in the second round. And I think your edge rushers or our edge rushers may be able to get after Trevor Lawrence. You have, like you said, you have some veteran, I believe you said veteran tackles on there, but I think Montez Sweat could possibly have a big day. Obviously, we're missing a huge, intricate part of this defensive line in Chase Young. But we do have some solid depth in James Smith-Williams, who has been making some noise in training camp and the preseason this past year. So we have some solid depth. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. When I was trying to look at you guys' roster, I felt like personally a strength or a little weakness maybe your interior defensive line as far as your defensive tackles. Now, your pass rushers, your edge rushers, Josh Allen, Trayvon Walker are amazing. But is your interior defensive line a little bit of a weakness?
If you asked me that question last year, I absolutely say it is. The addition of Foley Fatukasi, and then you also have the development of Devon Hamilton, a guy from the Urban Meyer era. As much as I hate to give him credit, he kind of did get a good pick there. The development of him developing as the nose tackle for this team, Foley Fatukasi and then Roy Robertson Harris on the other side, 2 recent free agent additions. I think what they've shown throughout the preseason is that they can be capable run stuffers. They understand they've played good gap accountability, everything like that. So I think it's honestly this game is going to be a huge test for them. It's the first time they're actually going to see a legit running back and a legit offensive line. The Browns really didn't play their starters whenever we saw them. We didn't see Nick Chubb. We didn't see Kareem Hunt. We didn't see Najee Harris. We didn't see any of the big running backs that we wanted to see outside of Josh Jacobs in the Hall of Fame game when we had no actual defensive starters playing. So I would love to come on here and tout this run defense like I feel like I am already, but we have yet to see what they look like against a good offensive line, which the Commanders have. And then obviously Antonio Gibson is a 1,000-yard back. So it could be a weakness, but as of right now, I'm going to say it's not.
Yeah, so I look like, again, looking at you guys as interior defensive line, I felt like Antonio Gibson could have had a day, running between the tackles. Now I want to avoid running outside as much as possible because your edge rushers scare me to death, especially
don't want to play with that speed.
But I really think we could have a day on the ground. And now I don't know if you've been paying attention to it. I'm pretty sure you have though. 90% of chance of rain on Sunday. So we could see a game where it's just run, 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 and maybe we can take advantage of that and try to tire out that interior defensive line. Now it's very unfortunate because a game like this could call for Brian Robinson, and obviously we know the unfortunate situation that happened to him. He will now be missing this game, but he would have been a big part of this game even if it wasn't raining. But now that it's going to be 90% chance of rain, we're going to run the ball a lot. So we have a guy named Jonathan Williams, who I'm not the biggest fan of. I felt like Jared Patterson was better than him, but he even may get some type of burn this game just because of the weather playing such a factor. Now, I want to talk a little bit about your back end. You know, your secondary, more so of a Shaquille Griffin going up against Terry McLaurin. How do you feel about that matchup, first of all? And talk a little bit about your secondary outside of Shaquille Griffin.
Well, I'll start off right here. It's not going to be Shaq Griffin covering Terry McLaurin. It's going to be Tyson Campbell.
Hey,
you expect to see Shaq Griffin probably following whether either be Jahan Dotson or Curtis Samuel, one of those two. You know, because the Jaguars did invest in the depth. They got Darius Williams, who had an incredible 2020 year for the Rams. Obviously, kind of took a step back in 2021. So we're hoping that he follows his footsteps from 2020 and not 2021, where he had the 4 interceptions, the 10 pass breakups, everything like that. But Tyson Campbell has been a man I have been touting as having an AJ Terrell level breakout year in year 2. You know, in the second half of his 2021 rookie year, he was a man on fire. He had 4 interceptions in the last 6 games, had almost 10 passes defended in the last 6 games when the Jaguars moved to a primarily zone defense. So Tyson Campbell, I have 100% confidence in. And I think it's going to be an incredible matchup, Terry McLaurin versus Tyson Campbell. Then obviously I think Jahan Dotson and Curtis Samuel will have – they'll win. There will be some that Shaq Griffin and Darius Williams win with those. And then I do think safety Andre Cisco is a heavy sleeper. For whatever reason, Urban Meyer didn't feel the need to play him, but he was an absolute ball hawk when he was at Syracuse. He was one of the top Big Ten safeties in interceptions while he was at Syracuse. And it's his second year. Whatever reason, he didn't play. But whenever he did play in 2021, he was constantly around the ball. He had a couple dropped interceptions, unfortunately. He punched the ball out a couple times late in the year whenever he did finally see the field after Urban left. So I do think this Jaguar secondary is improved just because they're actually using the players in the way that they should be used, as sad as that is to say.
Okay. Now, I really thought our wide receivers versus your secondary, and like I know about Tyson Campbell, and I know he's solid, but I thought maybe, you know, our wide receivers, and maybe they still could, but now that you gave me a little bit more insight, my optimism of my wide receiving core versus your secondary went down a tad bit. But anytime you have a Terry McLaurin, you know, on your team, you're still a little confident. But it's always great to hear about, you know, other team and how they plan on matching up against a guy like Terry McLaurin. However, I want to flip the sides now and go to our defense versus you guys' offense. We're missing a big part of our secondary this Sunday. Maybe even our best player in our secondary, and that's Cameron Curl, who is now going to be out dealing with a hand injury. After the upgrade that you guys had at wide receiver this offseason, bringing in Zay Jones, bringing in Christian Kirk, to go alongside with Marvin Jones, I will be honest with you. I'm not scared of your wide receiving core, but it is a little concerning now that we are going to be out our best safety. Talk how those guys have been able to gel with Trevor Lawrence, and what are your expectations this Sunday for Zay Jones and Christian Kirk and even Marvin Jones, and how do you think you guys are going to fare against our cornerbacks and our safeties?
I honestly think that this Jaguars offense is not going to be predominantly one with one wide receiver, one tight end, one running back. You look back to what Doug Peterson had when he was with Philadelphia, and it was almost like a death by 1,000 cuts kind of offensive scheme. There wasn't one predominant wide receiver that took a bunch of the load. Obviously, Zach Ertz was probably the predominant pass catcher, even with Alshon Jeffrey there. You look at that and you convert it to what the Jacksonville Jaguars have, and they have a bunch of 2s and 3s. That is exactly what they have. There's no Terry McLaurin, there's no Amari Cooper, there's nothing like that on this Jaguars team, so that can really take over. And I do think, obviously, Kendall Fuller is a good corner in the league. Bobby McCain's a good safety in the league. And you look at those guys, but I do think eventually one's just going to break free, whether it be a Travis Etienne out of the backfield. Trevor Lawrence led the league in percentage of check down passes last year. That is Etienne's bread and butter. You're also getting back James Robinson. He was an effective pass catcher in 2020. For whatever reason, he wasn't used in that capacity in 2021. Then you look at Zay Jones, had a huge offseason. He definitely seems like he's one of Trevor's favorite targets. Christian Kirk, as you said, I've talked about, are the Jaguars going to square block and to circle hole him? Christian Kirk is a slot receiver. There's been talk as him being the number one, paid like the number one. Are they going to move him to the outside, which he won't perform well at? And then a quiet sleeper that I will say is Tim Jones. Tim Jones basically forced his way onto the team from he was a practice squad wide receiver in 2021. Obviously, he got signed to the preseason roster, and throughout the preseason, he was the Jaguars' leading receiver in not only catches but as well as yards. In the game against I want to say it was the Steelers, he had 70 total yards in that game, and 63 came after the catch. So Tim Jones is absolutely a great man to get the ball into his hands. I do think this is going to be a death by 1,000 cuts Jaguars offense, and it's not going to be predominantly one. And I do think they have the options to avoid the heavy hitters that the Commanders have in the secondary.
Okay. How do you, now that you brought up the Christian Kirk, move, and I kind of felt like he wasn't worth the money, I'll be honest with you. And you kind of alluded to the point as to why I felt like he wasn't, because he's a slot guy. And you feel like he's not going to perform outside. Were you a fan of the signing? And to this day, does it make sense to you, or were you looking for a guy that you could have outside alongside Marvin Jones, or a guy that you can move around? How do you assess that move, and are you a fan of it?
Well, for me, I was talking to a guy the other day, and I kind of just like in casual conversation brought up the point: would you rather them have the $18 million a year and now wide receiver? Would you rather roll into 2022 with Marvin Jones being someone that you're expecting to get 80 catches out of? Or would you rather have Christian Kirk, who has flirted with the 80 catch number in his career? For me, it comes down to, would you rather have the player or the money? And, Shad Khan can't take it with him when he dies, other than, rolling what little over he could. Mm-hmm. And so for me, getting Trevor Lawrence some help, whether it be Christian Kirk or not, I'm with it. Obviously there was the talk of the Jaguars offered more for Amari Cooper to the Dallas Cowboys. They just weren't willing to take on the contract, but the Browns were. So they went with the Browns despite the Jaguars having a better trade offer. Overall, I think they did the most they could to help Trevor Lawrence outside of neglecting another position like the linebacker position to go get a Jahan Dotson, a George Pickens, any of those guys that were kind of in that range in the draft to go get a wide receiver. I think they did the best they could with what was available to them.
Okay. Talk about Trevor Lawrence, him in his year 2. I know he didn't have like the best, rookie year. That could do to part of him learning and taking some time, and obviously the culture around him with Urban Meyer and stuff like that. How has Trevor Lawrence looked to you in the preseason and in training camp, and how are you feeling with him headed into year 2? And now we'll be having another new coordinator and offense with Doug Peterson calling the plays. I'm pretty sure him having to adapt to his second system in 2 years. How has Trevor Lawrence looked to you? How are you feeling about Trevor Lawrence headed into year 2?
Well, honestly, it's his third system in 3 years. You talk about his year at Clemson, but I do think that familiarity with Doug Peterson being a former quarterback, and then obviously he wanted Press Taylor elevated as the OC in Philadelphia. That's obviously a strong confidence booster in them. But I think they've built so much of the coaching staff around Trevor Lawrence. They bring in Jim Bob Cooter. They bring in a bunch of different offensive quality, basically control coaches to put around him. I do think he's shown a lot. I think they're kind of sculpting the offense around what his skill set is. And then you look at the separation the wide receivers have been able to get in the preseason thus far. I think it shows well for a fact that this wide receiver room has improved, which I think that is a huge talking point about the development of Trevor Lawrence. The 2021 Jaguars wide receiver room led the league in drops. So whenever you have 38 drops throughout the regular season, you're obviously going to have some regression. And it kind of felt like Trevor was just playing hero ball during some parts of the game, just because we were down so much at certain points of the year. So I do think the development of Trevor Lawrence is absolutely going to be a big step forward, partly just because of the competence in the coaching staff, then as well as the the step up in total talent that he has around him. He doesn't have Tavon Austin and Laquan Treadwell. He has Zay Jones, Evan Ingram, and Christian Kirk around him as much better talent. Now,
okay, Commander DJ says, ask him what the final score is going to be. Well, I was going to save that for a little bit later in the show. So I'm sure we'll get to the prediction part of the show a little bit later. But I'm still asking the questions and trying to get a little bit insight on the Jacksonville Jaguars. So now you talked about Trevor Lawrence. We talked about the defense. We talked about the secondary, the defensive line. Trevor Lawrence, the weapons. I think the final part, I guess the final two parts I would guess to talk about would be one, the running game, and Travis Etienne, you're finally getting him back. This is practically his rookie year. James Robinson also is coming back off of a torn ACL. How do you feel about those guys? Is Travis Etienne? I feel like he's a little bit at an advantage because we don't know what he can do at the NFL level, and that could be sneaky for us because again, we don't know what he can do. James Robinson, I feel like now that he's out of Urban Meyer's system, it wasn't him. He wasn't the problem, so I don't think he's gonna fall off or anything. I am a little concerned. I feel like honestly, I'm more concerned about your backfield than I am your receivers. Talk about your backfield and how do you feel about that? And what do you expect to see from them Sunday? And again, 90% chance of rain, so we could see a lot of James Robinson and Travis Etienne.
I do think, Travis Etienne is a make a man missing a phone booth type of back. He is insanely elusive, and that speed we were afraid wasn't going to come back, that quickness, that elusiveness we were afraid wasn't going to come back, seemed to come right back. It seemed like he never even lost it. So overall, Travis Etienne, I'm insanely excited about. He has shown incredible flashes throughout the preseason, whether lining up in the slot or also being able to be used out of the backfield. I think you're probably going to see some formations where James Robinson and Travis Etienne are both on the field at the same time. But then you talk about James Robinson. He's a man that hasn't seen a snap since week 15 of last year. He didn't get a single preseason touch. And as far as I'm aware, he hasn't gotten a ton of full contact practice in. So James Robinson, I'm a little bit concerned with just because he hasn't had the contact in so long that, thankfully Travis Etienne was able to get through the training camp and then also through the preseason. So honestly, I'm a little shaky on the running backs just as a whole because of the inexperience in live regular season snaps recently. So I am excited to see what Etienne does, but I'm also nervous about what he will do against a full defense that is potentially game planning against him.
Yeah, and we have a lot of speed on that defense from the defensive line and the linebackers that are going to be trying to cover him. Jamin Davis, our 19th overall pick from last year, will have his hands full. Hopefully he could, stay attached to it, Travis Etienne. But I appreciate the insight on the players where we covered every phase of the game. I guess not the special teams. I guess we can cover that now. Your kicker. If I read it right, I believe I came across it on Twitter that he missed like 4 in a row, maybe, and then he finally hit a 54-yarder. I'll clean that up for me if I didn't get at that right. But am I along the right track, I guess, as far as that?
It's been a carousel of all carousels. I feel like there's carousels on the carousel at this point. The Jaguars have had 6 kickers throughout this offseason so far. They brought 2 into camp, and they released one after the Hall of Fame game, and it's just kind of been a revolving door of people coming in and out of this Jaguars team. But they finally settle on Riley Patterson. Doug Peterson talked about how they've had their eye on him while he was up at Detroit. They were just kind of waiting to see what happened with that. And then the second he did get cut by Detroit, they jettisoned both kickers that they had on the roster. And that was kind of some of the headlines you saw. Yeah, they're a week away from game day, and the Jaguars don't have a kicker on their roster. Well, they were in the process of picking up Riley Patterson, who the special teams coach today spoke, and he said he's been looking incredible during practice. The last practice, he went 10 for 11. With the one miss being outside of 50. So there's that for the final practice of the game before they travel up to Washington. I have no idea what to expect out of him. We have not seen him kick in a game at all, preseason or not, in a Jaguars uniform. So the first look we all get at him will be Sunday.
Yeah, and that has to be a little concerning. Well, not a little. That has to be a lot of concerning, because the kicking position is very important. PATs, field goals. I mean, who's to say? And I don't want to jinx it because I hope this is a blowout. I'll be honest with you. I hope we win by multiple scores. But let's say 2017 is your score or 2018 is your score. You send Riley Patterson out there for a 48-yard attempt in the rain, and he shanks it. And again, that your heart is going to be pounding because you haven't seen this guy kick before, right? So I definitely understand your pain because we went through a kicking carousel last year. We let go of Dustin Hopkins. We brought in Brian Johnson, who couldn't even get the ball over the line of scrimmage. We also had what was another kicker? What was it? Dustin Hopkins, not Brian Robinson, Brian Johnson rather, who actually won us a game, and it was Kurt Blewett. That's his name, the guy that couldn't get it over the offensive and defensive line. I know, right? Kurt Blewett. That is a fitting name and not a name that you would want as a kicker, but he definitely blew it. He blew multiple games with us, especially that game in Denver last year. So I definitely understand your pain when it comes to kicking. We finally settled on Joey Sly, and hopefully he can carry his momentum that he had last year after the hamstring injury into this year. Hometown guy from Virginia. So hopefully we can be fine on that front and we don't have no special teams woes. But now that we covered the players and everything on the field, all three phases, let's talk about your coaching staff before we get into keys to victory for you guys in the final score. So let's start with the man of the hour, the head coach, John Kine, and general manager. They decided to bring in Doug Peterson. Well, your initial thoughts and an initial reaction to the hire of Doug Peterson, were you a fan of it? Are you a fan of it now? And how do you think he's had as a summer or had a summer as a coach so far, and how has he grasped the players if he has at all?
Oh, for one, I think he has absolutely snatched a hold of the players' attention and his trust. There was a lot of trust that needed to be rebuilt. The players said that. The coaching staff that remained, we had one coach remain, Bernie Parmalee, the running backs coach. He's even spoke to the fact that trust needed to be rebuilt within the building. So there's that. But I honestly, my take on him 4 months ago, whenever the whole search was still going on, was I was all aboard the Byron Leftwich train. I was upset when Byron Leftwich didn't become the Jaguars head coach. But obviously, you bring in a guy that has won a Super Bowl, and he brings along with him, Press Taylor, who I've said, he obviously wanted him promoted prior to his departure in Philadelphia. Then you bring in Mike Caldwell as the defensive coordinator. He's the linebackers coach, obviously, in Tampa Bay. And you look at the linebackers that were in Tampa Bay, Shaquille Barrett, Devin White. I can go on and on and on about the linebackers that were all-stars for the Tampa Bay defense. So overall, I do think this Jaguars coaching staff is heavily revamped, and there's a sense of normalcy of what an NFL team is supposed to look like. And I think that is almost solely on the shoulders of Doug Peterson, bringing some normalcy back. He understands what normalcy looks like, not only from a player's perspective, but also through his time with Andy Reid as a coach, and then also coaching his own team in Philadelphia. So I'm very excited to see what Doug Peterson has in store for this Jaguars team.
Okay, and can I be honest with you for a second? I'm not the biggest Doug Peterson fan. And it doesn't have anything to do with, the Philadelphia Eagles being our rival or anything. But maybe it's just because of the aggressive nature of Doug Peterson. I feel like, I honestly think in 2017 when they won the Super Bowl, I feel like their offensive coordinator Frank Reich had a lot to do with that success that year. I'm not going to not give him any credit because it's obviously his team and he had a lot to do with it. But maybe it's just his aggressive nature that he has. He is a solid offensive play caller and offensive mind, but it was at times where I would feel bad for Eagles fans because it would be like 4th and 10 from their own in their own territory, and this guy decides to go for it, and then they don't get it, and he basically loses them the game. And let me clear it up: it's not in situations where they need to go for it. This is just him rolling the dice, 4th and 6 early in the game on your own side of the field. Why are you doing that? So maybe my only issue with Doug Peterson is his aggressive nature. How do you feel about that? Is that something that you're fine with, that you like, or is that something that could be a little, too concerning, or be something that you'd be like, okay, hopefully he's not like that here? Or honestly, do you like that?
Well, for one, I'm going to take you on a little trip back to 2017. Foxborough, Massachusetts. There's less than 10 minutes left in the game. The Jaguars are up by almost 3 scores. And Blake Bortles has the ball in his hands. And every single drive in the fourth quarter went the exact same way. They did not get very many first downs, if any at all. And almost all of them went run, pass, punt. They were insanely conservative. They were sitting on the ball. They were chewing clock. And I solely believe that is the reason the Jaguars were not in the Super Bowl in 2017, was because they got absurdly conservative and they did not finish the Patriots. They didn't finish that Bill Belichick defense. And so whenever I heard the hire of Doug Peterson, I went and got his book. And one of the first things he talked about in the book was that Super Bowl run. And he said, I saw what the Jaguars did, and I saw them take their foot off the pedal. And I knew I couldn't take my foot off the pedal. And it didn't seem like they did. And, ultimately those decisions, the Philly special style plays going forward on fourth down, won him a Super Bowl. So the fact that I've been burned by horribly conservative football play calling, I'm absolutely all aboard someone that is actually willing to, to reach down in his pants, feel he's got something, and say, we're going to win this damn game. And I don't care what these people think, because I'd rather try to win than try not to lose. So I'm all about it. I'm all aboard the Doug Peterson aggressiveness train.
Okay. So before we move on to your next coach, Press Taylor, what are some of the concerns that you may have with Doug Peterson? Maybe some of the reasons why he was outed in Philadelphia. Is there any concerns? Maybe you're not concerned with Doug Peterson at all and you're all in. But if you have some early concerns, I know it's kind of early because you haven't seen him coach in a Jags game. But if there's anything that you have and you like to share it, is there any early concerns that you may have with Dougie P?
Early on, I had the one concern of the relationship completely deteriorating with Carson Wentz. But, I spoke with a lot of Philadelphia Eagle fans. I had some on the channel and everything. And they basically just kind of reassured me, hey, it was more of a Carson just being a wacko than it was Doug, and kind of just that they kind of more blamed it on Carson ruining the relationship than Doug ruining the relationship.
Of course,
and obviously Eagles fans. and yeah, they pushed Donovan McNabb out of there way too early as well. But at the same time, it's easier to replace a coach than it is a franchise quarterback, and so that it seems that was one of the reasons that Peterson was let go when he was, and just. That was solved pretty quickly for me, and that was the one big concern I had, and that was squashed in the summer.
Okay. Let me let you in on a little something about Eagles fans, okay? All summer long, they've been talking about how trash Carson Wentz is. He's been getting disrespected. I mean, they have guys like Geno Smith ahead of him in the quarterback ranking order.
Ooh.
Like, this guy wasn't just a MVP frontrunner a couple ago. In 2019, he carried the Eagles with no wide receivers. Travis Fulgham is who he was throwing to the playoffs. And they're disrespecting this guy as if just terrible. He's not terrible. But like the Eagles fans, man, they're salty. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
They that's just how they are. That's how Philadelphia fans are, man. With any of their sports, they're going to be quick to blame the player. So I am a little off topic here, but I am interested to see how he's going to go when he plays the Link. I know they're going to boo the crap out of Carson Wentz when he goes back to the Link, but I'm not saying he has nothing to do with the relationship deteriorating, but of course, Eagles fans are going to tell you it was all Carson Wentz because it's easier to get detached to Doug Peterson than it is a franchise quarterback that they once cheered for and they love so much. So, again, not saying he didn't have anything to do with it, but it's easier for them to put it all on Carson Wentz. But moving on to your next coach that I want you to talk highly about, or talk about, I should say, is Press Taylor. This is his first year in Jacksonville, 10th season in the NFL. He spent the 2013 to 20 season on the Philadelphia coaching staff. How do you feel about Press Taylor? What's his kind of offensive scheme? What are some things that you've seen from early? What are some things that you like so far? What are some things that may be concerning for Press Taylor so far from you?
Well, for one, I was very excited. I didn't know a bunch about Press Taylor whenever the offensive coordinator hire was made, but once I kind of did some digging into him, I saw that Frank Wright, whenever he did decide to go to Indianapolis, immediately took Press Taylor with him to be the offensive coordinator. And whenever you look at that 2021 Colts team and this 2022 Jaguars team that he's now running the offense for, I think there's a lot of similarities through it. You have a decent offensive line, some really strong players, some middle of the road players, a very, very good running back, and then a lot of questions at the wide receiver position with a mobile quarterback. I think there's a lot of similarities. And I think one of the strengths of that Colts team last year was the offense. The only difference is now Press Taylor has a better quarterback to play with, and he still has the mediocre wide receivers, the good running backs, and then also the middle of the road offensive line. So I think the addition of Press Taylor is going to be a great one, especially with the familiarity he has of what Doug Peterson wants to run. I think it's a match made in heaven with Doug Peterson and Press Taylor being offensive coordinator and head coach together.
Okay, so you just so as of right now, like, what is I don't know if you already addressed it, but what is he more of like a a passing kind of guy? What is his scheme like as far as if he is a passer? Is he more of a deep threat kind of guy that likes to take the top off? Is he a RPO short passing game kind of guy? What have you seen so far from Press Taylor?
I honestly think he's going to play into the strength of Trevor Lawrence, and that is a lot of run pass option plays. I think a lot of RPO is in store for this Jaguars offense. Trevor has a great set of legs that a lot of people don't know about. He's taken plays to the house in college. So I do think there's a bunch of run pass option in store for this Jaguars offense between the speed of Travis Etienne, the very quiet speed of Trevor Lawrence, and then the incredible speed that these Jaguar wide receivers have.
Okay, so let's look a little bit more. Let's see if I can find some other things as far as Press Taylor. Yeah, obviously they say he was a part of the Eagles coaching staff. He coached Carson Wentz, so he has some history. This may be his first time being in Jacksonville, and I believe offensive coordinator. But he's not rookie as far as having some experience on the coaching staff. Now let's get to your final coach before we get to keys to victory and your prediction. Mike Caldwell is now your defensive coordinator, another guy that's first season in Jacksonville, but it's 15 years in the NFL, brings in 14 years of NFL coaching experience, 11 of playing experience from 2019 to 21. He helped the Bucks lead the NFL in rushing defense. What are your early thoughts about Mike Caldwell, and if there's any concerns that you have about him, please share.
Oh, I feel like I'm just a giant Jaguars homer now at this point because I'm just going to continue to gush about these hires that have been made. But Mike Caldwell, you look at the one of the strengths of that Tampa Bay defense, and that it was absolutely the linebackers. You had Shaquille Barrett, who you can kind of say was a defensive lineman with the fact he played on the line as a pass rusher, but still he was a linebacker on the depth chart. So eventually, Mike Caldwell did have his hand in that development, and the entire development of the Tampa Bay linebacking room. You have Devin White, Shaquille Barrett, all of them. And I do think with the athleticism and the speed and the overall just playing ability and talent that you compare this Jaguars defense to, the youth of it compared to what Mike Caldwell had to play with and mold in Tampa Bay, I think there's a lot of similarities between the two. Devin Lloyd did get sacks. Chad Muma did get sacks. They were able to drop into coverage. So I do think there's a lot going on for Mike Caldwell going forward to play with. And then you add the entire defense. And I do think we're going to see a lot of similarities between Tampa's defense last year and now for the Jaguars defense.
Okay. Now, what is it more of his MO? The Jack Del guy that you're very familiar with, he's more of a zone guy. He's a guy that likes to sit and solve zone, which drives me crazy. Like, go get him, send him some pressure, man. But what is his MO like? Is he more of an aggressive play caller, like a Wink Martindale, who's now in Philly or in New York, who's known for blitzing a lot? What is he like? Is he a zone man? Is he a guy that's gonna get aggressive? And I understand it's just preseason, so he's not gonna show everything. It's gonna be a little bit vanilla. But any early tendencies that you've seen from Mike Caldwell?
Insanely exotic packages. There was a lot of packages we saw even in the preseason where there was one guy with his hand in the dirt and there was a bunch of guys just standing up ready to either rush the pass. I saw one package against the Browns where he had 4 of the 5 guys on the line standing up, and he only had Foley Fatukasi with his hand in the ground. And eventually they did get good pressure. I think Deshaun Watson still was in the game. So overall, that was what Mike Caldwell showed. Whether that's going to be what we see, I don't know, but I'm very excited to see what Mike Caldwell was able to draw up because he is definitely going to bring some exotic packages going forward.
What's going on, Metaphor? How are you doing? I appreciate everyone that's out there. So again, we've covered now your whole team. Now let's get into the fun part, the keys to victory and the final score prediction. So let's start with your keys to victory for your Jacksonville Jaguars against my Washington Commanders. And again, guys, we weren't here to really talk a lot about the Commanders. I mean, you guys are on my channel, so you guys hear me talk about the Commanders all the time. This was more so of an inside look of the opponent and the Jacksonville Jaguars. What are some of your victory? Maybe 3 to about 4, that you have, or even more. It's up to you, however many you want to share. But let's go ahead and start with your keys to victory. Number 1 for your Jaguars to get the victory and land of early.
Absolutely. When you talk about the NFL in these days, you talk about offense, and you have to get Trevor Lawrence going immediately. You have to get him with the short game. You have to get him comfortable, especially if it's going to be raining. You have to get him settled down, and that is absolutely what they're going to look to do, and that is absolutely a key to victory. If the Jaguars are going to have any success, they're going to have to score points, and if they do score points, it's going to be off of the arm of Trevor Lawrence for the first one.
And do you have multiple that you like to share before I jump in and say my counter to that?
Oh, absolutely. You look at the last year for Carson Wentz and what happened in Week 18 when the Jaguars knocked the Colts out of the playoffs. You talk about insane pressure on Carson Wentz, and I do think the Jaguars are going to have an incredible pressure upon them to get after Carson Wentz early. I think if you do get after Carson Wentz early, you can rattle him early. As someone that we saw twice last year in Jacksonville, you get after him early, you get the snowball rolling, and then he kind of just becomes frazzled, and he's not going to be able to go through his reads correctly, and he's just going to play bad football, which is ultimately what led the Jaguars to just kind of dominating that game in Week 18 to knock them out of the playoffs.
Okay, so that's two good keys to victory that I appreciate you dropping on us. Now my counter for that, number 1 for me, we have to get off to a fast start. I mean, we really never get off to a fast start, and it feels like this has been the same story for years now as a Washington fan. We never get off the fast starts. We got to find a way to jump on the Jaguars and jump on you guys fast, because if we allow you guys to stick around and keep it close, that's how we lose games like this. And I know you guys feel the same way about us, and that's how we feel about you guys. Is we should win this game. And I know you guys probably feel the same way when you saw the schedule week 1. You said, oh, Washington, we should be able to beat Washington. That's how it is here. We feel like we should beat Jacksonville, and there's no reason why we shouldn't jump on you guys fast. Now, that's my first key to victory. Next is we have to find a way to get off the field on third downs. I don't know about you, but Trevor Lawrence, going back to his days in Clemson, he can shred you when he's hot. And now that he actually have talent on that offensive side of the ball to throw to, as you said, last year he was throwing to Tavon Austin and guys like that, practice squad players, really, it could get trouble for us if we can't find a way to get stops and get pressure on Trevor Lawrence. He's a big guy and he can run too, so his legs scare me too. We got to find a way to get off the field on third downs, and if we can do that, I think we're in good shape. Also got to find a way to stay balanced. Again, now the weather's going to play a factor. It's kind of make me change my game plan and how I was going to assess this this game. I really wanted us to pass the ball a lot and take the top off of the defense at least one time to maybe Jahan Dawson or Terry McLaurin. But now, again, it's going to be a messy game. Going to be having to run a lot. I think we need to find a way to pound the rock. You guys probably will be seeing a lot of Antonio Gibson, some J.D. McKissick, and now Jonathan Williams with Brian Robinson being out. We got to find a way to attack the interior of that defensive line. Again, want to stay away from outside of running and holding on to the ball too long, because we know Josh Allen can get back there, and he's going up against Samuel Cosme, who had a really good rookie year for us out of Texas, but he did get hurt late in the season. So it'll be interesting to see how he is going to fare against Josh Allen or Trayvon Walker, however they want to put that rotation together. Going up against Charles Leno, it's going to be a hard-fought game, and I really hope we find a way to pound you guys inside, because the outside running, I want to stay away from as much as possible. Quick passes, get it out, to the receivers and let them work in space. We can't hold on to this ball too long. I know you say you guys have Shaquille Griffin, Tyson Campbell, but I really think our wide receiving core can take advantage of that secondary. Andre Cisco, you said he's out of I believe Syracuse, right? He's out of Syracuse. He was a guy that I liked last year, but they said he has some injury concerns. We'll see how he looks, but again, I think our wide receiving core can take advantage of your secondary. Now, before we get into the final score predictions, do you have any more keys to victories for you guys, or are you ready to jump into the final score prediction?
I'm ready to explain why the Jaguars are going to win.
I'm ready to explain why the Commanders are going to win this game. We'll start with you since you're the guest. Your final score prediction for the Jaguars versus Commanders, and why do you think the Jaguars will now be 1-0 on the season?
I do think the Jaguars are going to win this game. Like I said, I think this game has kind of trap game written all over it. There's a team that has a bunch of talent, a bunch of new talent on it that the league is not really familiar with. You know, if you polled 100 Jaguar or NFL fans who Foye Oluokun is, you probably wouldn't know he was the guy that led the league in tackles last year. He's 7th all time in NFL history in combined tackles for a single season. You had one of the best nose tackles. You had the insane amount of athleticism at linebacker. You had Darius Williams as the nickel. You had the wide receiver talent. There's a bunch of lower talent guys that really did elevate the total talent of this team. And I do think this game just has trap game written all over it. Obviously, you know, the betting line is going towards Jacksonville. Obviously, the line did go from 3.5 to 2.5 recently. The money's coming on Jacksonville. I think Vegas sees that this game is going to potentially lean Jacksonville's way. So ultimately, I just think it's going to be a trap game, and the Jaguars are going to take advantage early and steal a win early in Washington.
Let me first clear up the trap game scenario or trap game that I guess this is flowing around here. It's not a trap game. How can it be a trap game for a team that hasn't had any success in recent history? I understand we may have better talent, you know, but I don't feel like it's a trap game. It's week 1. You know what I'm saying? It'll be different.
You guys were a playoff team.
Huh?
Weren't you guys a playoff team like a year ago? Not last year, but the year prior?
2 years ago, we were 7-9. And again, yes, a playoff berth, but we got there because of how bad the NFC East was. Not saying, you know, somebody had to win it, not taking discredit for us winning, but we weren't really, we were mediocre, and that's how we've been for years now. I just think more so of it being week 1. I don't understand how you can call a game a trap game in week 1 for a team that hasn't made the playoffs or haven't made any noise in the playoffs for 30 years. You know what I'm saying? This is a team with a new quarterback. You know, this is going to be their 6th starting quarterback on opening day, I believe, in 6 years. So I just personally don't see how you can call it a trap game, but you're not the only person that I've been hearing it called a trap game. 2, I think Washington's going to win this game. I really do. I think you go back to last year, Carson Wentz is going to have a salty taste in his mouth because week 18 matchup. Although, I'm glad you're on here now. Can you please clear up for me that game was not just on Carson Wentz? Everyone wants to just put that loss on Carson Wentz as if he was the only one at fault for that loss against Jacksonville. Yes, he plays a big part in it because 1, he's the quarterback, and 2, he didn't play good. But it was a team loss. First of all, Indianapolis cannot win in Jacksonville for whatever reason. No. And 2, it was a team loss. Can you clear that up for us that was a team loss?
I mean, Carson Wentz wasn't out there playing defense whenever Trevor Lawrence was shredding them. So they got that going for him. And obviously there were the extenuating circumstances as the team decided that they just didn't want to show up to play that week. But obviously, whenever you look at team losses, you have to start with the face of the franchise. And unfortunately, it does fall on the quarterback's shoulders. And that quarterback was Carson Wentz.
And then now, getting back into my first of all, thank you for clearing that up. But getting back into the reason why I think we're going to win, I think overall you guys are, you know, starting afresh. You know, first year of Doug Peterson. This is our 3rd year of Ron Rivera. This is the first year that he says he expects to have expectations and actually contend for something. I think this talent is ready to rock and roll. Yes, we're missing a big part in Chase Young and Cameron Curl, but I think we're overall just more talented than you guys. Our continuity is there just because, again, year 3 of Ron and our rebuild. This is basically year 1. You have to start over. You know, I know you have year 2 players, and the big one being Trevor Lawrence, but now you kind of practically have to start over with Doug Peterson. I just personally think the talent there is much better. I think Washington is going to be playing at home. Again, Carson Wentz going to have the sour taste in his mouth. I just think it's no way we can't get off to a fast start and beat Jacksonville. And then the following week you have Detroit. But I guess we will have to agree to disagree on that. But do you have a final score, or do you think Jacksonville is just going to win?
I do have a score, and I do think it's probably going to be a very, very close game. I think this game might come down to who honestly has the ball last. I have the final score 24-23 Jaguars. I think it's going to be a very close game. I think on paper, these two teams are very evenly matched. They have talent on both sides of the ball on opposite ends of the skill positions. So I do think it's going to be a much better matchup than a lot of people are expecting. I've seen people calling it the game that nobody plans on watching. I saw what was it, NBC put out a graphic and everyone said, no one's going to be watching this. Why are you making graphics for it? But I do think this game is going to be quietly one of the better games of the week.
Yeah, I agree too. But let's see before we get out of here. Let's see some of the score predictions in the chat. 38-14, Washington wins. Let's see. Says no Cameron Crowe in the yes, no Cameron Crowe is playing, so that's something that they got that you guys can take advantage of. Jeremy Reeves will have to step in. 34-10 Commanders, so 2 blowouts back to back. I would love to see that. If that happened, let's see who else said something about the score prediction if there's any more out there. Let's see if we can find one. Here it goes. DeAndre Taylor, thank you so much for the super chat. Really do appreciate it. He says 21-10 Commanders. Now, that's a score that I could definitely see a little bit of. I'm going to go ahead and say we win by 2 possessions. I really think I'm going to say 26-13. I really am.
Okay.
I think it's going to be a close game in the beginning. I think it's going to start as a close game, but I think Washington is going to pull away, put their foot on the gas, and it's going to be a 1 possession game late, maybe like 20, maybe 21-13 or whatever. And then Washington, or let's say 19-13, and then Washington gets the final touchdown to put it away. Jacksonville's going to be looking to get a stop, to get the ball back to Trevor Lawrence. They can't do that, and Washington gets the final score and salts it away. That's my prediction. We have your prediction. We'll have to see who's right. Let's see. Final thing. Philip B says 27-21 Washington. Let's see if we have one more. Diego says 100-0 Washington. Gerald P says Scary Terry. Terry McLaurin's I feel like he's gonna have a solid day. I don't know about a huge day just because of the weather. But we'll see. But yeah, man, thank you so much, Jags
Absolutely.
for joining the show. Washington, Jacksonville this Sunday at 1 p.m. I'm looking forward. I'm so happy that football is back. I cannot wait. But we're going to wrap up the show here. Jags Fan Cave, take it over. Let them know where they can find you at on all social media platforms.
Absolutely. I'm a very easy man to find. You look me up on any social media pretty much, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, at Jags Fan Cave, just as it sounds. And then also, if you prefer to read your news instead of watch me say them, I also have a website. I write articles, jagsfancave.com. Be sure to check me out there as well. I appreciate you having me on, man.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you for taking time out your night to come on the show and drop some gem on the Jacksonville Jaguars in the matchup this Sunday. So, yeah, man, it's me and boy Juan Gotti, Jags Fan Cave. We're checking out here. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe if you're new, and turn on post notifications so you get notified when new content is posted to the channel and we upload a video about the NFL, or in this case, our Washington Commanders. We're on the road to 5,000 subscribers. Jags Fan Cave channel will be in the link description, so make sure you guys check him out. As always, me and boy Juan Gotti and Jags Fan Cave. We're out. Peace.
Appreciate it.